The sea stretches ahead, endless, dark, uncrossable. Behind them, the thunder of 10,000 chariots shakes the earth. Dust swallows the horizon. Hundreds of thousands of freed slaves stand frozen between the water and the army.
We are overtaken!
Every face turns to one man. Musa grips his staff. He does not calculate. He does not negotiate. He says 5 words.
Indeed, with me is my Lord.
How did they get here? To understand, we need to go back to the day Musa walked into Pharaoh's palace and demanded the impossible. Egypt, the most powerful civilization on the face of the earth. Its monuments scraped the sky. Its armies conquered nations. Its pharaoh sat on a throne of gold and declared himself a god. But underneath the temples and the palaces and the statues that towered over the desert, there was another Egypt. An Egypt you did not see unless you looked down. The children of Israel, the descendants of Yaqub alayhi salam, had been enslaved for generations. Not a year, not a decade. Generations. Their sons were slaughtered at birth. Their daughters were kept alive for servitude. Their hands built every monument that Pharaoh claimed as his own glory. The Quran describes it in a single verse that contains centuries of suffering. Indeed, Pharaoh exalted himself in the land and made its people into factions, oppressing a sector. Among them, slaughtering their sons and keeping their females alive. Indeed, he was of the corrupters. History remembers the monuments. The Quran remembers the people underneath them. That single verse tells you whose side Allah is on. Into this darkness, Allah had sent 2 brothers with a single command. Musa alayhi salam had returned. The palace guards knew his face. The servants remembered him. The walls of this court still held the echoes of his childhood. The boy Pharaoh had pulled from the river. Raised as his own, fed from his table, dressed in his linen. That boy now stood in the center of the throne room, staff in hand, beside his brother Harun, alayhi salam. Most people imagine Musa walking into Pharaoh's court as a stranger. He was not a stranger. He had grown up in this palace. He had eaten at this table. The servants had bathed him. The guards had bowed to him, and now he stood before the man who raised him and told him everything he believed was a lie. That is not the courage of a stranger confronting a tyrant. That is the courage of a son telling his father, "You are wrong." And that is infinitely harder. He came with nothing. No army behind him, no gold to negotiate with, no weapons. Just a wooden staff, the same staff he had used as a shepherd in Madian. He did not bring force. He brought faith, and this staff in the hand of a man who trusted Allah would bring an empire to its knees. The weapon is never the object. It is the faith of the one holding it.
We are messengers of the Lord of the worlds,
Musa declared.
Send with us the children of Israel.
Pharaoh leaned forward on his throne. His eyes narrowed. He did not need to shout. His voice carried the weight of absolute power.
Did we not raise you among us as a child, and you remained among us for years of your life? And then you did that deed of yours which you did, and you were of the ungrateful.
The court went still. Every advisor, every guard, every servant knew what Pharaoh meant. The killing. The Egyptian man Musa had struck. The crime that had sent him fleeing into the desert years ago. Pharaoh was not just arguing, he was reminding Musa of his weakness. He was saying, "I know who you are. You are not a prophet. You are a fugitive." Musa did not flinch.
I did it then, while I was of those astray. So I fled from you when I feared you. Then my Lord granted me wisdom and made me one of the messengers.
He could have stayed in Madian. He could have lived quietly as a shepherd, married, at peace. No one would have blamed him. He had already fled for his life once. His wife was there. His new life was there. Going back meant risking everything he had built, his safety, his family, his freedom. And Pharaoh would make sure to remind him of the blood on his hands. Instead, he walked back into the palace of the man who wanted him dead and said, "Let my people go." While Musa spoke, Harun stood exactly one step behind him. He did not interrupt. He did not step forward. But when Pharaoh's words turned sharp and mocking, it was Harun's calm, measured voice that responded. He rephrased Musa's message with the eloquence that made court officials pause. He was the eloquence that Musa had asked Allah for. Musa had told Allah that his tongue was heavy, that he feared he would not be understood. And Allah did not fix Musa's speech. He gave him a brother. Sometimes the answer to your weakness is not to remove it, it is to send someone who completes you. Pharaoh looked at the two brothers and laughed. He turned to his court with the confidence of a man who had never been challenged. But Musa was not finished, and what he was about to show Pharaoh would shake Egypt to its foundations. Pharaoh demanded proof. Musa threw his staff onto the marble floor. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the wood twisted. It thickened. Scales rippled across its surface. A jaw split open, and in the space of a single breath, a massive serpent lay coiled on the floor of the throne room. Courtiers screamed, advisors stumbled backward, knocking over chairs, pressing themselves against the walls. Pharaoh gripped the arms of his throne. Then Musa drew his hand from beneath his arm, and it glowed. A brilliant, blazing white light, like a piece of the sun cupped in his palm. No fire, no flame, no disease. Just pure, impossible radiance pouring from human skin.
So he threw his staff, and suddenly it was a serpent manifest. And he drew out his hand, and suddenly it was white for the observers.
Two signs, back to back. The court fell silent. A piece of wood had become a living creature. A human hand had become a source of light. Not one person in that room, not the engineers who had built the pyramids, not the astronomers who mapped the stars, could explain what they had just seen. When your smartest people cannot explain something, you have two choices: submit or deny. Pharaoh chose denial, and that choice would cost him everything. But he recovered quickly. He always did. The man who had called himself God was not going to kneel before a shepherd with a stick. He had a plan. That night, behind closed doors, Pharaoh consulted Haman, his chief minister. Haman was the machinery that made tyranny efficient. He did not hold the sword, he sharpened it. While Pharaoh paced and raged, Haman calmly turned rage into bureaucracy. He drafted the messages. He selected the sorcerers. He organized the logistics. He sent riders to every corner of Egypt with a single decree: bring me your best. Every tyrant has a Haman, someone who never claims divine status, never raises his voice, but without whom the orders would be just words. Haman is the reminder that evil is not just about the man at the top. It is about the system that obeys him. The plan was simple. Pharaoh would stage a public spectacle on the day of the festival, the most attended day of the year. Every Egyptian would be watching. He would bring the greatest sorcerers in the kingdom, pit them against Musa, in front of all of Egypt, and humiliate him publicly. If Musa's God was so powerful, let him prove it in front of the whole world.
Postpone the matter of him and his brother, and send among the city's gatherers, who will bring you every skilled magician.
Sorcerers from every province received the summons. Little did any of them know that this day would change their lives and their deaths forever. The day of the festival arrived. The arena was vast, an open expanse packed with thousands of spectators from every corner of Egypt. Rich and poor, merchant and farmer, soldier and slave, all of them had come to watch Pharaoh destroy the man who dared challenge him. The sorcerers entered first, dozens of Egypt's finest men who had spent their entire lives mastering the art of illusion. They walked with the swagger of champions, confident in their craft, confident in their reward. They approached Pharaoh's elevated throne and asked the question that professionals always ask.
Will there indeed be a reward for us if we are the winners?
They haggled, they negotiated, they wanted guarantees before we watch what happens next. Look at these men carefully. They are not villains. They are craftsmen, men who have spent their lives perfecting an art. They walk into this arena expecting glory, expecting gold. In a few minutes, everything they believe about the world will shatter, and they will have to make the fastest, most consequential decision of their lives. The question is not whether they were wrong. It is what they do when they discover it. Remember that they negotiated their payment first. These were men who asked, "What's in it for me?" In a matter of minutes, these same men would throw away every coin, every promise, every benefit Pharaoh had offered. That transformation is only powerful because we saw who they were before. They turned to face Musa from across the arena. The crowd went silent. Someone called out,
O Musa, either you throw or we will be the first to throw.
Musa looked at the ropes and staffs laid out before him. His answer was calm.
You throw!
They threw. Rope after rope hit the ground, and through their sorcery, each one came alive. They slithered and writhed across the sand, serpents twisting over each other, filling the arena floor with what appeared to be a sea of living snakes, hundreds of them. The crowd gasped, children screamed. The spectacle was enormous, the finest illusion Egypt had ever produced. And the Quran tells us something remarkable. Musa, a prophet of Allah, a man who had spoken with God at the burning bush, felt fear. He sensed within himself apprehension, did Musa. Why does Allah tell us this? Because fear is not weakness. Fear is human. If Musa had felt nothing, his courage would mean nothing. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to obey despite it. Allah spoke, "Do not be afraid. Indeed, it is you who are superior." Musa did not stop being afraid. He threw anyway. Musa threw his staff. It hit the sand and became something else entirely. Not an illusion, not a trick of the eye. A living, breathing serpent, massive, real, undeniable. It moved through the arena like a force of nature, its jaw opening wide, and one by one, it swallowed every rope, every staff, every illusion the sorcerers had crafted. Decades of knowledge, consumed in seconds. The sand was clean. Not a single rope remained. The crowd was frozen. The sorcerers staggered backward, staring at the ground where their craft had been moments ago. The difference was not one of degree, it was one of kind. An illusion tricks the eye. A miracle breaks the laws of nature. And the sorcerers, the men who understood illusion better than anyone alive, knew the difference. What Musa did was not a better trick. It was not a trick at all, and then something happened that no one expected. Not Pharaoh, not the crowd, not even Musa. The sorcerers, all of them, hit the ground. They fell to their faces in prostration, not slowly, not one at a time, instantly, as a body. Their foreheads hit the earth and they declared, loud enough for the entire arena to hear,
We have believed in the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of Musa and Harun.
Most people assume they were convinced by some moment of soul-searching. That is not what the Quran says. The Quran says they prostrated immediately, instantly. No period of doubt, no theological discussion. They prostrated on the spot. Why? Because they were experts. A layperson watching from the stands might have thought Musa's serpent was just a better trick, a more impressive performance. The sorcerers knew it was impossible. They had spent their entire careers learning what magic could and could not do. They understood in that instant. that what Musa had done was beyond the boundaries of any craft known to man. Their expertise made them the fastest converts in the room. Sometimes it is the people who know the most who submit the quickest. The chief sorcerer was the first to prostrate, not one of many, the first. His forehead touched the earth before the other sorcerers even finished processing what they had seen. And when he lifted his head, he found Pharaoh staring directly at him. This man had been the best in Egypt at creating illusions. He had spent decades perfecting the art of making the false appear real. And in one moment, he recognized that everything he had ever done was itself an illusion. And what Musa had just done was the only real thing he had ever witnessed. The greatest moment of his life was not his greatest trick. It was the moment he stopped performing. Minutes ago, these men had been promised wealth, status, and proximity to the throne. The moment they prostrated, they lost all of it. They went from Pharaoh's champions to Pharaoh's enemies in a single heartbeat. They knew what Pharaoh did to his enemies. They had seen the crucifixions. They had seen the severed limbs. And they bowed anyway. They could have stayed silent. They could have thrown their ropes, collected their gold, and gone home. They could have believed privately and told no one. Instead, they declared it in the most dangerous place on earth. On Pharaoh's stage, in front of his people, while he watched. Years later, perhaps only hours later, the sorcerers would be executed. Hands and feet cut off on opposite sides, crucified on palm trunks. But the Quran tells us something extraordinary about their ending. They died as believers. They entered the arena that morning as Pharaoh's weapons. They left as Allah's martyrs. In under an hour, they went from the wrong side of history to the right side of eternity. Pharaoh's face twisted. He did not see converts. He saw traitors. He descended from his throne. His voice was controlled, but every word cut like a blade.
You believed in him before I gave you permission.
Not before you had proof, not before you thought it through, before I gave you permission. Listen to those words. They reveal everything about Pharaoh's mind. He does not see faith as a matter of truth or falsehood. He sees it as a matter of authority. Believing without his permission was the crime, not the belief itself. This is not a man who denies God. This is a man who thinks he is God. He made his threat without hesitation.
I will surely cut off your hands and your feet on opposite sides, and I will surely crucify you on the trunks of palm trees.
The sorcerers looked at him. These men, who minutes ago had been bargaining for gold, gave him an answer that would echo through the ages.
Never will we prefer you over what has come to us of clear proofs and over he who created us. So decree whatever you are to decree. You can only decree for this worldly life.
You can only decree for this worldly life. All they had to do was take it back. One sentence. We believe in Pharaoh. That was all. They would have kept their hands, their feet, their lives, their gold. Instead, they chose the next world over this one. And they had known that world existed for approximately 10 minutes. In a single morning, Pharaoh's greatest weapon had become his greatest defeat. But he was far from finished. If magic could not stop Musa, then force would. And what was coming next would make the sorcerers' contest look like a warm-up.
I beg of you,
Pharaoh had lost the sorcerers, but he had not lost control. Not yet. In the days that followed, a voice rose from an unexpected place, not from the Israelites. Not from the streets, but from within Pharaoh's own court. A man stood up, a nobleman from Pharaoh's own family. He stood slowly, not dramatically, not with a shout, but with the deliberate calm of a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head. His voice did not tremble. He spoke not as a rebel, but as an advisor, framing truth as wisdom, making it politically dangerous for them to act against Musa.
Would you kill a man because he says, "My Lord is Allah"? while he has brought you clear proofs from your Lord? If he is a liar, upon him is his lie.
But if he is truthful, there will strike you some of what he promises you. This man ate at Pharaoh's table. He had wealth, safety, status, everything the sorcerers had just lost. And he risked it all by standing up in court and asking one question no one could answer. He could have remained silent. He had successfully hidden his faith for years, perhaps decades. He had mastered the art of invisible belief. One more day of silence would not have mattered. But he could not watch Musa be condemned without saying a word. Silence, he discovered, had a cost too. This was the third kind of courage. The sorcerers had the courage of instant conviction, one sign, one prostration. Musa had the courage of prophetic certainty. Commanded by Allah, he obeyed. This man had the courage of long, quiet endurance. Years of hiding, years of watching, and then one moment where silence was no longer bearable. Faith does not always look like a dramatic declaration. Sometimes it looks like a carefully worded question asked at exactly the right time. The entire 40th chapter of the Quran, Surah Ghafir, is sometimes called the believer al-Mumin. Not because of Musa, not because of Pharaoh, because of this one unnamed man from Pharaoh's own household who could not stay silent. He did not build a mosque. He did not lead an army. He asked one question in one room on one afternoon. And Allah preserved his words for all of human history. That is the weight of a single act of courage. Pharaoh dismissed him. He turned to Haman and gave a new order. Build me a tower that I may reach the ways to the heavens, so I might look at the God of Musa, and indeed I think he is a liar. A tower to reach God built by the man who refused to believe God was real. But Pharaoh's defiance would soon cost far more than bricks. The plagues came. The first struck at the heart of everything Egypt worshipped. The Nile, not just a river, but the lifeblood of Egyptian civilization. Their crops drank from its waters. Their gods lived in its depths. Their identity flowed within its current, and now it turned to blood. Not metaphorical blood, not reddish water, blood. Fish died and floated to the surface. The stench filled the air, the smell of rot and iron carried on the warm Egyptian wind. The Egyptians could not drink. They tried wells, they tried cisterns. Everything they touched ran red. According to scholars, when the Israelites drew water from the same source, it ran clear in their hands. If that account is authentic, its implications are devastating because it means the plague was not random destruction. It was targeted. It knew the difference between oppressor and oppressed, the very river that had been an instrument of Egypt's cruelty. The river Pharaoh had thrown Israelite babies into became an instrument of divine justice. Pharaoh sent for Musa. Pray to your Lord, invoke for us the promise he made with you. If you remove this punishment, we will send with you the children of Israel. Musa prayed. The plague lifted, the Nile ran clear, and Pharaoh broke his word. It was only the beginning.
So we sent upon them the flood and locusts and lice and frogs and blood as distinct signs. But they were arrogant and were a criminal people.
One after another, the signs descended on Egypt. The flood came after the blood, waters rising beyond any season, destroying crops and muddying homes. Then the locusts, black clouds descending from the sky, devouring every green thing that remained. What the flood had not drowned, the locusts ate. Then the lice, covering every surface, every garment, every strand of hair. Impossible to escape, impossible to clean. Then the frogs pouring from the river, from the wells, from every body of water. Into their beds, into their bread ovens, into their mouths when they tried to eat. Each plague had the same rhythm. The devastation would fall. Pharaoh would summon Musa. Pray to your Lord, he would say, his voice just a little more desperate each time. If you remove the punishment from us, we will surely believe you, and we will. Send with you the children of Israel. Musa would pray. The plague would lift, and Pharaoh every single time would harden his heart and break his word. 5 signs, 5 chances, 5 experiments with the same result. How many times does Allah need to show us before we listen? 5 plagues, 5 chances. Pharaoh rejected them all, and now Musa received a new command, not to warn, but to leave. But before we follow Musa into the night, there is one more person in this story who deserves her moment. While the plagues ravaged Egypt and Pharaoh raged against Musa, there was a woman in the palace who saw everything clearly. She lived closer to Pharaoh than anyone alive. She slept in the most magnificent palace in the ancient world. She had servants, jewels, gardens, unlimited power. She was married to a man who declared himself God. Her name was Asiya bint Muzahim, Pharaoh's wife, and she was a believer. She had been a believer since the day she had pulled a baby from the river. A baby no one wanted, floating in a basket in the Nile. "He will be a comfort to me and you," she had told Pharaoh. "Kill him not." That baby was Musa. Now, years later, as her husband declared war on the very child she had saved, Asiya knelt on the marble floor of her private chamber, the same marble that had been laid by Israelite slaves. She pressed her forehead to the cold stone and whispered the prayer that would outlive every monument Pharaoh ever built.
My Lord, build for me near you a house in paradise, and save me from Pharaoh and his deeds, and save me from the wrongdoing people.
She did not ask for a bigger palace. She did not ask for a better husband. She asked for proximity to Allah. She had had everything this world could offer: luxury, power, status, and she had discovered that none of it filled the emptiness inside. The palace was the prison. The prayer mat was the escape. Every prayer she made was a death sentence waiting to be discovered. Every time she whispered Allah's name in Pharaoh's palace, she risked everything. She could not share her faith with anyone. She could not pray openly. She lived surrounded by idols she knew were false. She could have surrendered to her circumstances. She could have told herself that belief in the heart was enough. Instead, she became one of the 4 greatest women in all of human history mentioned by the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, alongside Maryam, Khadijah, and Fatima. When Pharaoh eventually discovered her faith according to Islamic tradition, he tortured her. He staked her to the ground under the desert sun, and in that moment, as she lay dying, Allah showed her what he had built for her. The house near him in paradise that she had asked for. She smiled as she left this world because she could see the next one. The woman who chose a house near Allah over a palace with Pharaoh died looking at what she chose. Her prayer was answered with precision. The palace she left behind crumbled with Egypt. The house she was promised will never end. In the dead of night, the command came.
Travel by night with my servants. Indeed, you will be pursued.
Musa sent word through the Israelite quarter. A whisper passed from house to house in the darkness. Pack your things. We are leaving tonight. These were people who had been slaves for generations. They had never made a decision for themselves. They had never packed for a journey, because no one had ever told them they could leave. And now a man told them, walk out. Just walk out through the door and keep walking. They were told to take nothing that made noise, no livestock that might bray, no metal pots that might clang. They wrapped their sandals in cloth to muffle their footsteps. For generations they had cried aloud under whips. Now they had to be quieter than they had ever been. Slavery had been loud. Freedom began with silence. Yusha ibn Nun, a young man whom scholars identify as Musa's devoted attendant, the one mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, moved through the darkened streets going from family to family. "It is time," he whispered. He carried the elderly who could not walk fast enough. He quieted crying children. He took the heaviest bundles from mothers' arms. He was not a prophet. He was not a general. He was a young man doing what needed to be done. Every great prophetic mission has people like Yusha, the ones who handle the logistics of liberation. They are never mentioned in the dramatic retellings. No one paints their portrait. But without them, the miracle at the shore would never have happened, because the people would never have reached the shore. Serving the mission is as holy as leading it. A vast multitude moved through the darkness toward the eastern horizon. The largest escape in history had begun. By dawn, Egypt woke to silence. The slave quarters were empty. When word reached Pharaoh, something broke in him. Not grief, not regret, fury. The absolute blinding fury of a man who has been defied by the people he considered property.
Indeed, those are but a small band, and indeed they are enraging us.
A small band, he commanded the mightiest army on the continent. He controlled every resource in Egypt. And he called the Israelites, unarmed, barefoot, carrying children, a threat. His words reveal his terror. A man who is truly powerful does not need to gather every soldier in his kingdom to chase a group of slaves. Pharaoh's mobilization was not a show of strength. It was a confession of fear. He sent riders to every garrison. He assembled chariots, cavalry, infantry, the full military might of the most advanced civilization of the age. He put himself at the front. This was no longer about retrieving slaves. This was annihilation. The Israelites were on foot. Pharaoh's army was on horses. The distance was closing fast. And ahead of the fleeing nation, the Red Sea waited. They reached the sea at dawn. The Red Sea stretched before them, vast, dark, and uncrossable. No boats, no bridges, no shallow points. Just water, filling the entire horizon, reflecting the pale light of a sky that offered no help. And then they heard it, a low rumble, then a tremor in the ground beneath their feet. And then on the western horizon, a wall of dust, rising, spreading, darkening the sky. Within that dust, the glint of bronze, the flash of spear tips catching the first light of morning. And beneath it all, the rhythmic thunder of 10,000 chariots. Pharaoh's army. Panic hit the crowd like a wave. Mothers pulled children against their chests. Old men dropped to their knees. Families who had walked all night in silence now screamed. The sound of terror swept through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Put yourself there, just for one moment. Children clinging to your legs, your elderly mother on your back. The sea fills your entire horizon. Behind you, the sound of chariots getting louder with every heartbeat. There is no boat. There is no bridge. There is no plan. Someone beside you falls to their knees and gives up. That is the moment before the miracle, and miracles in the Quran always come at the last possible second. Never a second sooner, a voice cut through the chaos, raw, desperate.
Indeed, we are overtaken!
Every face turned to Musa. Musa turned to face them. He did not calculate. He did not scan the shoreline for escape routes. He did not negotiate with the army behind him or plead with the sea before him. He looked at the terrified faces of his people, the faces of slaves who had just tasted freedom for the first time in their lives, and were about to lose it, and he spoke.
No, indeed, with me is my Lord. He will guide me.
5 words. Count the odds. Behind him, the largest, most technologically advanced military force of the age, chariots, cavalry, archers, infantry. In front of him, the Red Sea, uncrossable, unstoppable, infinite. Around him, terrified civilians with no weapons, no training, no experience. And his response is 5 words. This is not strategy. This is not calculation. This is the purest statement of faith ever recorded in Scripture. At the moment when reason says surrender, when logic says it is over, a man looks at the impossible and says, "My Lord is with me," and that changes everything. Allah spoke.
Strike with your staff the sea.
Musa raised the staff, the same wooden shepherd's staff from Madian, the same staff that had become a serpent in Pharaoh's court, the same staff that had swallowed the sorcerer's lies, and he struck the surface of the Red Sea. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a tremor ran through the water, a crack appeared on the surface, and the sea began to move. Not sideways, upward. Two walls of water surged toward the sky, rising, separating, climbing higher and higher until they towered overhead like mountains. The Quran says it plainly, it parted, and each portion was like a great towering mountain. Not a metaphor. Scale. Two walls of ocean, each as tall as a mountain, standing on either side of bare, dry sand. Between them, a path. Dry. Firm. Impossible. A corridor across the seabed, with walls of trembling water on either side. Fish were visible through the translucent blue. Sea creatures hovered in the suspended walls. The ocean was not reacting to wind or tide, it was obeying a command. Every law of physics was suspended. Every assumption about what water does was broken. And on the dry path, between two mountains of sea, barefoot slaves walked to freedom, the most cinematic image in all of Scripture. The crowd froze, no one moved. The path was there, dry, clear, impossible, and the people were too stunned to take the first step. Musa stepped forward first, and then Yusha, the young man, stepped onto the wet sand right behind Musa and turned back toward the families at the front of the crowd. "Come," he called, "it is holding. Walk." He extended his hand to an elderly woman who could not move. He lifted a child whose mother was paralyzed with fear. He was the bridge between the miracle and the people who needed to trust it. A miracle can split the sea, but someone still has to convince people to walk through it. Faith sometimes needs a hand extended. One by one, then in families, then in waves they moved, mothers whispering prayers. Children staring up at the fish above their heads, old men weeping as they walked, on sand that should have been 100 feet underwater. And behind them Pharaoh reached the shore. He saw the path, the dry corridor between two mountains of water, and he did not hesitate. He did not stop. He did not look up at the walls of sea trembling on either side and think, "This is not for me." He charged in, his entire army followed, chariots, horses, soldiers by the thousand, pouring into the corridor with the blind fury of a man who had spent his entire life being obeyed by everything, by men, by nature, by the world itself. The sea held for the faithful, for every terrified child clinging to their parent, for every old man who could barely walk, for every family carrying everything they owned. The walls of water had stood firm. Not a drop had touched them. But the moment Pharaoh and his army entered the same path, the same sea, the same sand, the walls began to tremble. The water did not collapse randomly. It knew, it waited. It held until the last Israelite stepped onto the far shore and felt solid ground beneath their feet. Then it let go. The walls fell. Millions of tons of water crashed down, not gradually, not in stages, in a single catastrophic instant. The sea swallowed Pharaoh's army whole, chariots splintered, horses screamed. Soldiers who had been charging at full speed were buried under a mountain of ocean. In the space of a breath, the mightiest military force of the age ceased to exist. And in the churning, closing water, one voice cried out, "Pharaoh." The water was in his lungs. His armor dragged him down. The golden headdress, the symbol of his divinity, was torn from his head by the current. And in that moment, in the final seconds of his life, The man who had said, "I am your Lord Most High," screamed,
I believe that there is no deity except that in whom the children of Israel believe, and I am of the Muslims.
"Do not feel sympathy. This is not a man who discovered faith. This is a man who discovered consequences. For years he had every sign. The staff, the sorcerers who prostrated, the blood, the floods, the locusts, the lice, the frogs, 5 plagues, each one saying, 'Submit.' He refused them all. He only believed when the water was already in his lungs. That is not belief. That is calculation. A man who sees death and tries the last remaining option, and Allah's response cuts through every pretense.
Now? And you had disobeyed before and were of the corrupters?
Now, there are moments when too late is not a tragedy, it is a verdict. The waves settled. The Red Sea closed over Pharaoh's army as if the path had never existed. The water was calm, the shore was quiet, and then a body on the sand. Pharaoh's body, bloated, lifeless, stripped of every crown, every robe, every pretension of divinity. The man who had told an entire civilization that he was God now lay on a beach. A piece of human wreckage deposited by the tide. Allah made a declaration that would echo for millennia.
So today we will save you in body, that you may be to those who succeed you a sign. And indeed, many among the people of our signs are heedless.
Not his soul, his body. His corpse was preserved, not buried with honors, not mourned by a nation. Preserved like evidence in a courtroom that will never adjourn. Some scholars have connected this verse to mummies discovered in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. Whether or not a specific mummy is the Pharaoh of the Exodus remains a matter of scholarly discussion. But the Quranic promise stands. This body was kept, not as a memorial to a king, but as a warning to anyone who thinks power makes them God. The idea of preserving Pharaoh's corpse as a sign for those who come after only becomes fully meaningful in an age where mummies can be studied and displayed under glass, our age. 14 centuries before Egyptology was a science, the Quran told us there would be a body to find. On the far shore, the freed nations stood in silence. They watched the waves settle. The army that had terrorized them for generations, the chariots, the horses, the soldiers, the Pharaoh who had slaughtered their sons was gone, all of it, in minutes. For the first time in their lives, no one was coming after them. Every single one of us has a Red Sea moment. Not a literal sea, not a literal army, but a moment where the path forward is impossible, and the retreat backward is worse. A diagnosis that splits your life into before and after. A bankruptcy that erases everything you built. A betrayal so sudden you cannot breathe. In that moment, you have the same 2 choices that Musa and Pharaoh had. You can stand at the water's edge and say, "My Lord is with me. He will guide me." You can trust that the one who parted the sea for barefoot slaves can part whatever stands between you and the other side. Or you can spend your life insisting you are in control, refusing every sign, not plagues, but the gentle ones. A close call on the highway, a verse that hits different at 3 in the morning. A friend who tells you the truth when you do not want to hear it. The Quran ends this story with a devastating observation, and it is not aimed at Pharaoh, it is aimed at us.
And indeed, many among the people of our signs are heedless.
Not Pharaoh's people, not the ancient Egyptians, the people, all people, us. The question was never whether Allah sends signs. He sends them constantly, in every sunrise, in every near miss, in every quiet moment where something inside you says, "Turn back." The only question is whether you respond before it is too late, or whether you recognize the truth only when the water has already closed over your head. The Israelites had crossed the sea. They were free, but freedom, they were about to discover is harder than bondage. Before Musa had even returned from Mount Sinai, before the ink had dried on the covenant between God and his people, the nation he had just liberated turned to a golden calf and bowed. And somewhere beyond the desert, a man was waiting, a man who knew things no prophet knew. A man whose wisdom was so strange, so counterintuitive, that even Musa, who had spoken with Allah, struggled to understand him. His name was Hidir. That story next time.